All right. So, John, you have done incredibly well in business as a contractor, but you've done super well building your own personal brand and your own personal account, right? Especially on Instagram. I noticed you recently passed 250,000 followers, so congrats on that.
Thank you, sir.
But for the people who don't know you and maybe they haven't done research on you, it wasn't always like sunshine and rainbows, right? Even though right now a lot of people probably look up to you and they see you as a role model. What were the early stages in your life that provide the context to who you are today?
Yeah, man. So, to give you a little background, I had a pretty rough childhood. I mean, there's people that had it way rougher than me, but got in a lot of trouble. So I got my life back together, man. Found Christ and got my life back together around 24. Worked for a ministry for 3 years, man, and just really got okay with humility, right? Like that was one of the key factors in my growth was cleaning the toilets, sweeping the floors, and being at peace with it. Um, and God really just honored all of those things. And I married my wife, I would say around 29. So I got my life together around 24, 25. Started my business at right before I turned 30. Um, but I took that same humility into my business. So what I've noticed now is everybody wants to go into business and they want to be the shot caller right off rip. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's who they want to be. They want to have their subs. They want to show up in a nice clothes. And I will say I neglected some things I shouldn't have neglected. I did neglect my family. It did get a hold of me. But this concept that I'm talking about still needs to be taken care of. Listen, I kept my clean pair of clothes in my truck. I would sweep the floors, jackhammer, lay the tile, set the door. Come lunchtime, everybody's sitting down eating lunch. I changed into my collared shirt, wiped the sweat, tried to get the paint or whatever was off my fingernails, and I went and sold a job, right? And then I got home and I did invoices and proposals. Um, Now I did let that take control where I was putting in way too many hours. And some people will argue with me and say the reason you're successful now is because you did sacrifice those things. And I'm not gonna argue with them, but I will say I could have put my family on a higher pedestal. And there was a time that my business did become my idol, right? I did put my business, I started looking at the way I was blessed. If my business was doing well, my relationship with God was well. And it was a misconcept that, again, the Lord had to humble me and show me that I need to put him first. So here I am 10 years later, man. I just took a week vacation, right? Just a little testimony. I took a week vacation and it was windy and rough. So I wasn't able to, we got stuck in the house a lot. I couldn't even work. I couldn't even work because I had no emails. My team handled everything. I had no calls of people blowing me up. My team handled everything. So like me going stir crazy and like trying to solve problems, there was no problems for me to solve because I put the right people in the right place. But again, we're talking, I'm going on year 11 now, right? So, for your listeners out there, if you can't grab that broom and sweep that floor and take out the trash and do all the jobs that you don't want to do on year 1 to 5, then hang up your entrepreneurship. You've been watching Instagram too long and you think it's easy, and it's really not.
I mean, I feel like the construction industry is unique to other industries. A lot of other industries, they're not as physical and they're not as hard labor as construction is. And especially as a contractor, if you're like right in the beginning, like completely brand new, nobody, no clients, you have nothing, like maybe you don't have much in the bank account either, then you will literally have to do everything yourself.
Amen.
Because yeah, because it's so expensive to outsource a lot of this, and like I was speaking to like the very first episode, right? Everything comes full circle. In the very first episode, Chris, who's from the UK, was talking about how his very first job was like something about clearing rubbish for like an old age pensioner. Like that was what he was doing. It's very like, you know, less than $100, $200 jobs. And he did that for the first few years. I'm not even talking months, I mean years. Like
Yeah.
that's the type of jobs he did. And now he's built like an 8-figure portfolio for his business, like over 10 years later,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people see the Instagram, the whole Instagram look of entrepreneurs, and they think that it's a very quick and very easy, and that's the lifestyle that you live. Like you leave your job tomorrow, and that's you, right? But that's
Amen.
not how it works.
No, I have this thing I teach my clients. What do you love? What do you like? What are you okay with? What do you hate? And I put it in 4 categories. And the thing that you do with what do you hate, you obviously have to do that job in the beginning. But a lot of us don't document it. Like, what do I love running my mouth. Like that's what I love, speaking, running my mouth, creating relationships, right? That's what I love to do. I hate admin. Right? So my first employee was admin. I knew this is what I hate. This is the first thing I have to release. But I created that goal in my head. Hey, I'm going to sweep the floor. I'm going to do the proposals. I'm going to do the invoice. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And the first second I have the ability, I'm going to hire that admin. If that means I have to make X amount of dollars for X amount of time, then so be it. But a lot of people don't put that to fruition either. They're doing it all, but they have no goal or structure to when they can hire that next person. So, I mean, for your viewers, that's what I would say too. What do you love? What do you like? What are you okay with? And what do you hate? And write all those things down. And you want to hire those people in that order: what you hate, what you're okay with, what you like, and then you keep what you love, right? Um, and that's the goal of it. Right now, I'm only in the sales part of things because that's what I love to do. So I'm in that category now, but it didn't happen overnight either. And as far as the construction industry, I think goes for anybody in business as well. Like, you've just got to do the mundane thing. You got to do it. And I think if you're not, there's a verse in the Bible, not to get religious on you, but I love it. It says, for those who exalt themselves will be humble, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. And I think that has to do with, I'm overqualified for that. You're exalting yourself over a position. And I think sometimes we got to learn to we got to be bloomed where we're planted, because that creates us and sharpens us for the position that we actually want to obtain, right? But we skip that process a lot of times. And then if we obtain that position, it's very short lived because they're not willing to do those mundane things.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And like I said, the construction industry is unique in that regard, because there's so many aspects to it. And again, like in episode 2, Marshall talked about how construction is not only a service-based business, it's a service-based business. It's a material, you're basically a material supplier for your customers, because they don't care about how much you're getting the materials for, right?
Yeah.
There's so many aspects to the wheel, and you have to know and understand all of it, and you have to do all of it, especially in the beginning, because you can't afford to hire the really good people to take control over it for you. Like you just mentioned, you had good people in place when you went on vacation. Like you can't be looking, and you won't be able to afford those types of people within the first few years. And if you expect to do that, then you're just going to give up the second it gets hard. So that's important.
Yeah, I
Now,
just had a client want to throw in the towel. He made a $4,000 boo boo, and I called him and I said, "Hey man, he's a demo guy. I said, hey man, I got these 4 demos lined up," and he went to saying how he's just going to go work for someone else. So I didn't talk him out of it. And I said this. I said, listen, you had a $4,000 boo boo. I'm sorry, it was $6,000 boo boo. I said, I just presented you 4 demos. That was your way out. And instead of you seeing the way out, you would rather lick your wounds and just go work for somebody. Like, this is the ante of entrepreneurship. Like, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to cost you. But you got to be willing to hit it, man. And you got to, a lot of times people think when they go into business, they're going to make all this money. I mean, I had employees make more money than me for the first 5 years, as I was hiring some of those key players, man. I paid myself 52,000 a year, $1,000 a week for the first 3 years. After 3 years, I upped it to 85. I didn't start making over 100 till after my 5th year. I wasn't making over 100,000 a year. And I had trades guys that were working for me, getting 55, 60 hours a week that were making that. So, I mean, that's just part of it.
yeah, You mentioned like your troubles when you were younger, and a lot. You mentioned being having humility as like something that essentially saved you, right? Saved you from going like down a really dark path. Would you say you were like one of those very angry teenagers when you were younger who felt like maybe they were dealt the wrong cards and you were maybe taking out on everyone?
I mean, I definitely got in a lot of trouble, and a lot of fights and stuff. I wouldn't say angry. I was just wanting to find a place to belong. And unfortunately, I just leaned more towards the street life, and having that camaraderie. And I just, got around the wrong crowd, man, the gangs and things of that nature, and people that I wasn't embarrassed to share my lifestyle, like the way that you know, in other words, if they came to my house, I wasn't embarrassed, right? Because they kind of had the same thing going on at their house. And we were just like-minded, unfortunately, in that area. And I just chose the wrong path, man. And in that came fighting and all that stuff. If I'm honest with you, Hussein, like I never really felt that poor pity me thing. Now, I will say this, teachers gave it to me. Teachers and counselors and stuff would be like, John, we understand. Like they would comfort me with, hey, we understand why you are the way you are. Look what's going on. So, I mean, I received it. I'm like, okay, cool. But I realized as I got older that they were just keeping me in my funk. Really, what they needed to do was smack me in my head and say, hey, this isn't an excuse. You know what I mean? And here's the thing, even though they gave me the excuse, I still dealt with the consequences. So, like, if you want to play the victimhood, like, oh, well, I would be successful if, or I would do better in business if, then fine. You can take your excuse. The excuse may be valid, right? I had a valid excuse. I still dealt with all the consequences that came with the excuse. So if you want to hinder, if you want to grab that you don't have good parents, or you don't have an investor, or you didn't have a good upbringing, or you didn't have the business background on the reason you're not successful, your excuse may be valid, but your consequences will remain the same, and you'll remain right in the same place you are right now.
That's like what it comes down to. Like Hormozy mentions it a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with Alex
Oh
Hormozy
yeah.
because he always talks about his parents and them not being supportive of his business journey. And like he said the exact same thing in like one of his videos recently about how someone blaming their parents, and it doesn't have to be a parent. Parents like the most common thing, but it can be a friend, it can be like anyone in life, it can be a boss who doesn't believe in them and who puts them down every single day. The second you blame them for the situation you're in, you let them win, right? You let them win and have control over your life. And the second you start ignoring them and act like they don't matter too much or their opinion doesn't matter to in terms of like what you want to be, that's when you start taking control over
Amen.
your life and what you want to be. So it's like you couldn't have said it better. You hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head.
Yeah. And those, there's one of these favorite sayings that says, count it all joy when going through trials and tribulations of many kinds. For it's testing of your patience, and in testing of your patience it will build up your perseverance so you're not lacking nothing. And I love that saying, because it's like, count it all joy when going through trials and tribulations, but when you understand what's on the backside of it, and the perseverance and the strength that you'll gain through those moments, man, it says that you'll be lacking nothing. It'll help strengthen your patience and your endurance. The patience to deal with things, and the endurance to go through them. So it's like, when hard times happen, or those things that we want to grab for excuses, if we'll, instead of grab them for excuses and consider them joy, like, I'm going to go through joy with this. I don't want to be going through this, but I know who's going to be created on the backside. So hey, let's run this thing, right? um so yeah, man, I think it's huge. And we are in a society today where it's everybody else's fault. One of my core values for my business is responsive excellence, attitude, and liability. The last one is liability, no finger pointing. Because I say in all my crews, like, listen, at the end of the day, it's not the sub's fault, it's not the client's fault. It's our issue. We need to take it on. How could we have dealt with it differently? How could we have foreseen it? And what's the solution? Because us pointing out that that client is a you know what isn't going to change the fact that she's a you know what. So we need to take liability for it. How could we have dealt with it differently? How could we have foreseen this? Let's document it so we know that these type of clients, here's the red flags. So next time we'll deal with it better. But if we just say she's a you know what, then we're always going to run into them, right? So we've always got to accept liability for ourselves. And then for the guys watching your construction school call here, like, you know, if you don't have core values, get them, man. Get your core values. We live and die by them, man. And that's something you can train your team so that you can give them your DNA. And it's huge.
The core values are like something that a lot of contractors look past, and they kind of see them as being a bit cringe and like not important, because like that's another thing, right? Obviously the US is a bit different, but in the UK like 99% of contractors are all guys, right? They're all male men, and they're all a bit usually a bit older men as well. So like they if they're like, for example, grew up in the 70s or 80s, you know, they've got pretty big egos,
Yeah.
and when they start listening to like motivational things, or like, you know, that type of things, they kind of have a resistance to it, because they're like, you know, I'm a tough guy, you know, I don't need to talk about you know, liability and taking responsibility and, you know, all this stuff. But it's so important because they're your references for when things go wrong. That's the things that you point to, especially if you have employees. Like, you can hold them to account to those core values, because that's what you told them on the day one when you were interviewing them. Like,
Amen.
you can refer back to that. The second
Amen.
something goes wrong, you can say, hey, remember when we were interviewing you and we walked you through these core values? Well, what happened to this? What happened to that? Right?
Yeah.
And if when you don't have that reference point, then you're a bit all over the place. You might say one thing to one guy, you might say another thing to another guy. They start talking to each other. They feel like one guy's getting favored over another. And then all things like, as they
100%.
say, shit hits the fan, basically.
That's it. That's what
Yeah.
construction is. Controlled chaos, man. I mean, and I had two partners. My first, you know, when I went out on my own, I used a guy. His name was Larry West. He was like a father figure to me. He had the license, and then he kind of brought his son in, and I was very adolescent, and I mean, he was like a brother to me. So I was like, yeah, bring him on. It was never part of the deal, so I kind of got stuck with two partners. But when I decided to move on, it was when I started placing core values and vision and mission and all these, and then I started teaching it and seeing these entrepreneurs prosper and grow. And when I brought it to Larry, who's older, he's the guy you explained. You know, they heard me, but they didn't hear me, and that was the pivotal point for me to say, okay, it's time for me to, you know, bow out and go out on my own and take these systems and processes and mission and vision and core values and apply them to my company and see what happens. And you know, I'm gonna be honest. I probably work 15 to 20 hours in my construction business now, where I used to do 70. Uh, like today, I'm on this podcast. I'm going to go drive around and look at jobs. I don't have to. I just want to. But I've put all these things into practice these last 4 years, man. And it works. And my profits have close to quadruple now as far as what I take home personally. So it really is a blessing, man. But you've got to humble yourself. That's the thing, because yeah, it's especially to a construction guy, it sounds goofy. We're gonna sit around and freaking sing kumbaya and come up with core values and a mission and a vision. Like, it does. It sounds goofy and lame, but man, it gives you that direction, you know. And a lot of it's biblical too, man. Write it down on the stone so it don't be forgetting. My people perish for a lack of vision. You know, processes and systems. Everybody has processes and systems, but it's usually in the owner's head. It's not anything special. It's just getting it out of your head, putting it on paper, and teaching those around you what you already know, so that you don't have to be there. You know. But again, the old school way is, if I don't do it, it don't get done. Well, that's the problem. That's why you're always doing it. Right? So
Yeah,
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 that old school stuff is going to keep me in business and keep me successful for a long time, because most construction workers, I would say 85% of them have that mentality. Even the younger ones, even the ones that are my age, 30s and 40s. You know, it's just the get her done mentality. Wake up in the morning, work hard, and just go. And that's their mentality. Just make it happen. That was one of the things I heard more. Just make it happen. Just make it happen. So
yeah. Yeah, I remember like about maybe about 2 3 months ago, I was talking to a contractor in the UK, right, and he was basically kind of going on a rant about how there's so many tire kickers nowadays. There's so many people that aren't serious. The economy's broken. All these reasons and excuses, essentially, right? I found out there were excuses later on, but
yeah,
then he essentially talked about how he went through like a um 15 estimate run of not getting a job, essentially, where he basically had met 15 people in a row for a job and he hadn't won any of them. And he was taught that's the reasons that he was punning up, essentially. And then I was while he was talking to me, I was just thinking in my head, like, how do I tell him without hurting his feelings, essentially? Like, how do I tell him that forget all these reasons that you just mentioned and throw them all in the bin? It's probably you. Like, it's probably
yeah,
something that you're doing. And
100%.
you mentioned that you're going to go out for estimates. What are like really common objections that you get from clients that like where you kind of like rub your hands together, right? Almost like I can't wait to respond to them now that they've mentioned this.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and that's part of life too. I think I'm close to that 15 run right now too. I actually was on the phone in my office when I was pulling into my office, and I was like, okay, you know what, we have plenty of work, so there's things that I might not want, and if I do want it, I want X amount. Well, we went about almost a little over a month now with no sales, so it's like, okay, we need to restructure. I'm not gonna call them all cheap. Oh, they're all cheap. No, I need to restructure. I've been a little too zealous on my price, I think, because we have plenty of work. So it's like, okay, we need to make some sales for these next couple months. So I'll make some compromises and whatnot. And that's part of business too. And again, you've got to teach your staff this too. Like when I start training my sales staff, I have to teach them this. Hey, and who knows? I almost sold a $513,000 remodel while I was on vacation. I thought it was sold. I thought it was in the bank. She called my office Friday morning and said that her husband is really ill and doesn't want to go forward with it right now. So it's just part of life. So we have to restructure and go grab some smaller ones that I necessarily might not have wanted, but now I kind of need to grab them, right? But I've got to understand that completely, to continue to move forward. So yeah, it's never no one else's fault. It's always yours, and you got to be okay with getting told no. If you're landing if you're landing all your jobs, you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? When I start landing over that 50 percentile, I know my numbers are too low. I need to be landing about 30% of them with good margins. So that way, and that's another thing. If you land the good ones with good margins, that gives you the ability to work on your business and not in your business. But if you land 70% of them with okay margins, you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be overwhelmed and moving, and you got a lot going on. And the margins are thin. So you got a lot going on and your cash flow somewhat. But if you land 30% of them with high margins, you can focus on those jobs better. Your cash flows there because you have high margins, and you can work on your business and not in it. Again, it's a game. You got to move. It's constantly moving. Everybody wants the high margins at a low job ratio. You can't always get them. I just told you I went through 15 and haven't got one, so I need to lower my margins a little bit. But it's part of business, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And like it's a coincidence because only yesterday I was watching this video by someone called Sabri Subi. He's basically a shark in Australia on Shark Tank Australia. Serial entrepreneur. I believe like it's one of the biggest companies in Australia. It's a
Wow.
marketing agency he runs, and he was talking about how the biggest reason why he's at the 9 figure mark and why a lot of people may be stuck at 6 and 7, for example, is two things. It's one, people are focusing too much on minimizing their cost per acquisition for a customer, i.e., they're aiming to get as many customers possible. That's their main focus. Whereas people like him and a lot of people who get to that level, they care. They put 80% of their time, and these were his words. He said they put 80% of their time towards increasing the average lifetime value of a customer, i.e., they're trying to increase what the value of every customer is 80% of the time, whereas 20% of the time they're only focused on how do we get more customers for a lower cost. And that's exactly what you just touched on there. How can you maybe reduce the amount of work you're getting in terms of a volume wise, but increase the value of that, where you're only maybe doing a few projects every, a year, really, it could be. But then there's a lot less stress on your head. There's a lot easier to actually fulfill on those, and you can work on your business rather than in your business. So
Absolutely.
that was one thing that's so true that you just mentioned.
Have
Um,
you ever heard of the book called Traction?
yeah, I've heard of Traction. Yeah.
So I've read it, and I mean I build a lot of my stuff off of it. But there's a story in there. It breaks it down like this. Would you want to do 100 million a year at 2%, or 10 million a year at 20%? It's both. It's still building. It's still netting $2 million. But on the lower end, you have 90 million less headaches, right? So it's like I can brag and tell you I did 100 million, but that's all ego. You're still yielding only the 2 million. I'd rather be the guy yielding 2 million at 10 million than the guy building $100 million company yielding only 2 million. But in our world, there's a lot of people, and I got sucked into that trap for 5 or 6 years. I wanted to become a $10 million company, and I achieved it at what cost? My health, my family. I didn't have processes and systems. It was chaos. It was money in and money out. And then the monster started eating me, and my payroll was $50,000 to $70,000 a week. So I had to sell. I had no choice to create cash flow. And in that, my production was suffering because my production can only produce so much. And there's a lot of people out there, not beating up on Grant Cardone, but a lot of construction guys grab his stuff and it's just sell, 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 sell. And sales works until you stop selling. Until that little bit catches up, and then you're going and getting loans, and then you're in debt, and then that monster just becomes to eat you. So for the listeners out there, man, don't look at your revenue base. That's all ego. That's freaking ego. What are you actually bringing home? That's what matters. I seen something on Instagram. It was Elliot. They asked him a question: how good did you do last year? He says we did 160 million. Blah 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 blah. And someone pointed out. Notice how he said we did 160 million. So he's grabbing you on the whole revenue. Their asset did 160 million. But what did he take home after you paid all your bill? And maybe he did good. Maybe he did 5, right? Which is still amazing. But it's like, quit giving us I did 6 million last year in revenue. I didn't make 6 million. I made 900,000, right? Which I'm happy with. But I'm not going to tell everybody I made $6 million because I didn't. I had to pay subcontractors and everything else. And I would rather do 6 million and net 900 than, do 10 million, because I was at one time and I was lucky to net 300,000, right? So I've tripled my profits last year. I tripled them. I'm on my way to quadruple them this year. And I've done almost half the revenue because I put practices in place, systems, processes. Core values aren't lame to me. Mission isn't lame to me. Vision isn't lame to me. And we have meetings, and construction workers hate meetings. We have meetings. We have field meetings, operation meetings, office meetings, admin meetings, combined meetings, hour and a half at a time. That scales us and projects us and puts us all on the same page so that we're working with efficiency. Most contractors in our world is like, I'm not trying to sit down and talk for an hour. And if they do, they talk and there's no action behind it. Everybody, they have a lot of good conversation, a lot of great ideas. It's not documented. There's no to-dos. No one leaves with who's doing what. We had great ideas, but who's doing them? So now we create those action items. Okay, these are the problems. Here's the solutions. Joe, you're doing this solution. Vicky, you're doing this solution. And we create those action items, and then we revisit them once a week. Now you're actually making progress, and everybody knows where they're driving. Where most construction workers, you can't even get them to sit down for an hour, or they'll tell you you're crazy. You know what I mean? The fact that, that's not what we do. Well, then keep doing what you do. And here's another saying I got for you, saying, what got you here won't get you there. So keep doing what you do. It got you there. It got you where you're at. You're doing okay, but you'll never get there, because doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results is the definition of insanity, right? So you're insane to think that you can keep doing the same things and expect different. Yeah, you got me preaching, Hussein.
No, preach. I mean, it's perfect. Um, it's true. I love that you mentioned the fact that contractors don't like meetings, right? And I feel like another problem that's linked to that contractors have, and it seems to, I don't know what it is, but for some reason contractors think they have a lot less time than they actually do. Like they act like they're the most busy person on the planet. They're like, oh, I'm taking phone calls, I'm on site, I'm doing all this. And yeah, some people are genuinely are like I won't take that away from them, but most of them are just it's an ego thing, to be honest with you. Like I remember I was speaking to someone a while ago and they were talking to me about how they were like, they were filled up with work, they don't have any social life, they don't have any time for their family, all this, right? And then I follow them on Instagram. So on Instagram I get a ton of like construction related videos. So and obviously when you follow someone on Instagram, you can see if they've liked the video or not. And
Mm-hmm.
I promise to God, right? I think maybe 90% of the construction related videos I saw liked by them, liked by them, liked by them, liked by them. So then I'm just thinking, like, how much time are they spending on their phone then? If they're telling me they're busy with all this work and they have no social life, like they're probably spending at least 3, 4 hours on their phone to see all these videos and like them and all of this. How do you actually balance your time? Because you do a lot, man. Like you're a religious man, which I really respect. You're a family man. You're a speaker. You're a coach. You're a contractor. How do you balance all of that?
We schedule what matters. We schedule what matters. And here's the thing. Most, and I would say most, I say 95% of people, especially contractors, they don't document what they do. They have no documentation of what they do. We do no more than 7. Most of us do 3 to 5 tasks every day, every week. So if they'll take the time and write those things down, what they need to do, and structure them. There is a time I answer my emails. I don't let my emails dictate my life. I don't. Because if I'm always in my email, I could be on the phone here with you and an email pops up, and then now I'm letting that email dictate where I'm at in that moment. And most people do that. They're busy and they're just doers and they're task oriented. And I'm guilty of that. I'm high strung ADHD. So I've had to learn to create things in my life to stop me from doing that. So I schedule what matters. I schedule my alone time with God. I schedule when I answer the phone. I schedule when I do my callbacks. I don't do my callbacks when I'm driving down the road. Oh, let me call Mrs. Smith and see if they like that contract. I have a time set that I call all my Mrs. Smiths, right? All of my follow-ups. There's a section of that day that consists of that. So that's what contractors don't do. They're busy spinning in circles. And here's the other thing. I'm going to uppercut a contractor right now. So I just told you I don't got much going on right now, right? Normally what I would do is I would go to fixing something. Okay, I've been dealing with this right here. We've been dealing with these certain subs. What can I put in place to fix that? Which means I got to sit still and actually use my brain, right? Or maybe it's invoicing, maybe it's a proposal, whatever it is. What a contractor would normally do is what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go have fun. What am I going to go do, Hussein? I'm going to go look at my jobs and see the progress. That's the fun part. Most contractors go and do that. They neglect everything else. They get home at 6 o'clock and they go, oh, I got to do the proposal and the invoice. No, you could have did that the 2 hours you were walking around just looking at stuff. You chose to go have fun and do what you wanted to do. Now you have to do what you have to do, and it's 6 o'clock at night, and you're taking that away from your family instead of utilizing it during the day when you had the time to do it because you were working. You weren't working. You can call it working because you were on your job sites, but the truth is you didn't have to be there. And that's what most entrepreneurs and business owners do. They do what they want to do, and then they take away from the time they need to with family and working on the business and do what they have to do. And that's the God's honest truth. And that's what we don't do. We don't write it down. Listen to me on this call. You'd only do 5 to 7 things. You're not as busy as you think you are. You're just not. Systemize it. If I don't know if you can see my calendar here, or try to pull it up here. We'll go into the month. So that's my
Oh,
month,
wow.
right?
Yeah.
But where am I at now? That's June, July, August. We'll go all the way to we'll go to November. I'm in November. I know what I'm
Oh,
doing in
wow. Yeah.
November. Why do I know what I'm doing in November? Because I do the same 5 to 7 things every day. So if I know this is what I do every day, I put it on my calendar because I know that's what I do. So I answer my emails at the same time every day. I check in on my office at the same time every day, and I systemize where I'm at. And people ask me all the time, dude, there's no way you're home at your family. You're a coach. Like you just said it. You're a coach, you're a speaker, you're a pastor, and you're a business owner. Those are all my passions. Why? I document them. I know what I got to do, and I do it. And that's the other thing. And I don't mean to keep taking all the time up. I know you want to ask me a question. But here's another thing. You can wear multiple hats in one day. Most people will schedule, oh, I got this one meeting, and that's their day. Their day consists of one meeting. Like, what? I'll literally wake up in the morning, do a coaching call, do a sales meeting for my construction company, then go to a church and start helping them organize an event that we got coming up. It was only 4 hours of my day. You know what I'm saying? Where one people like, well, I'm only going to do this one thing today. Well, that's your fault. You know what I mean? Like I can wear multiple hats in the same day. And I think that's where people get lost too. It's like, oh, well, I got a meeting at 2:00. So like their day consists of that meeting at 2:00. That meeting's only from 2 to 3. What are you doing from 2 to 4? What are you doing from 9 to 2? So those are the two different people that I run into right there.
That's amazing. I love that you brought your calendar because, like, I'm sure, like, 95, even probably 99% of contractors watching this video or listening, they're probably going to pull up their calendar and be like, yeah, this is pretty empty. Like, they've either not scheduled something, they've not recorded something, they've not written it down what they're going to do. They're very disorganized. And that's probably one of the biggest problems that contractors have.
You
Is their
schedule what
time. So,
matters. You want to
yeah.
work out? Do you really want to lose weight and work out? Put it on the calendar. Do you really want to do a date night with your wife? Put it on the calendar. You know what I mean? Do you really want to spend some alone time with God? Put it on the calendar. Like, and you feel those things, and then you notice when you schedule me, what did I do? I got my girls, because my girls tell me where to go. So they see what I got on my calendar, and they fill in the gaps. And then that way I don't double book myself either. You know, but I schedule what matters, man. And if it hits my calendar, it matters. So
That's beautiful. Well, John, I can't believe this is like already at the 40-minute mark. This is absolutely flown by. I'm sure like a lot of people will have found value from this. If you've not found value from this, then you rewatch the whole podcast like 5 times, man. Like seriously. But one thing we do on this podcast that we've stolen from Dario, a CEO, I don't know if you've heard of them, is they ask the guest to ask a question to the guest that comes on next, right? So before I put you on the spot and get a question from you, I'm going to ask you what Chris from last episode asked, and I think it's such a perfect closing question. He asked, what is the thing in your career that has brought you the most happiness?
watching other people succeed. So letting my cup overflow. And I think it's one of my passions. And I suggest every contractor do this. Train your team. Give them everything you've got. Pour your heart to them, all your secrets, everything that you got. Give it to them. And it's okay if they leave. Like I had someone say, John, are you scared if you train them? What if you train them and they leave? I says, well, what if I don't train them and they stay? Right? Give them everything you've got. Teach them. Learn. You'll learn from them as you give them everything you've learned. Like, and I promise you, man, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I promise you there's nothing more satisfying than seeing someone come in and just shine. And if they choose to leave you and go start something, they may be your best collaboration ever. They might be your best asset. out there, their best subcontractor, your best carpenter, who knows? So don't be fearful. Just let people succeed and give them everything that you've got. Just pour it to them, man.
Beautiful. All right, John. If I'm going to put you on the spot, I know this is
Yeah.
a bit of a tough one, and I've been thinking about asking guests before the podcast just to see if they can prepare something. But if you can speak to a contractor, right, what would be something you ask them?
What I would ask them is, what what do you value most? Like, what's the most important to you? Like, why? Let me rephrase that. Why did you start this business? What's the most important to you? What's the three most valuable things from starting your business? That's what I would ask them.
Perfect. That's been amazing. Guys, all of John's links will be the first ones in the description. You can check him out on Instagram as well. If you're listening on Spotify, the links will be there as well. Thank you guys for watching or listening. We'll see you guys next time.
Be blessed, Hussein. Thank you, brother.